Hello, my name is Jacob Toddson, and welcome back to the Wisdom of Odin. Today, we're going to be talking about sacred spaces and how to create, maintain, and best use them for your spiritual needs. And if you haven't been to this channel before, well, who am I and why am I talking about this? So I've been making YouTube videos for about 6 years now, starting with my explorations into Norse paganism, and then I kind of expanded that as I started to travel abroad when I sold all of my possessions to explore the Germanic, to explore the Celtic, the Scottish, the Irish, the deeper Scandinavian, the Finnish. And then I have also been exploring shamanism and the different shamanism traditions that exist still in this world today. Now, you should definitely know I'm not an initiated shaman, but I have participated a lot in core shamanism classes, traditional shamanism workshops, and different plant medicine ceremonies, all to kind of figure out why we're here and figure out more about the personal healing journey, about the spirit world. And so a lot of the information about sacred spaces and how to set them up today comes from a lot of different areas. And so I have a lot of amazing teachers who have taught me, and I've witnessed and been shown, from Lakota ceremonies to Siberian to Scandinavian to traditional core shamanism to just hippies in Glastonbury to witchcraft. There's a lot of different hodgepodges of beliefs that have all been thrown into what I'm about to share with you today. Now, some people might see that as a negative side, that you're just taking from so many different cultures. But I think in our globalized world, one of our benefits is that we all have something to teach one another. And so even though I've been a part of many different ceremonies and many different spaces, each culture, each tradition has very similar yet different and beautiful traditions that all create sacred spaces. And all of that has influenced me because I have learned from all these amazing cultures and teachers, and I have nothing but respect from all that I've learned. Now, normally I'm quite the minimalist, but it's time that I share with you where I am not a minimalist. Within this bag here are a large majority of my spiritual possessions, at least the ones that I can take with me. And so I have a lot of different side compartments here with cleansing equipment, with offerings, with drums, musical instruments. And so this is what I take with me to a lot of the Cincinnati sharing circles I've been doing. But we're gonna kind of unpack this and kind of show you how it turns into a sacred space. And so with that, let's break her open. Very commonly in neo-paganism today is the creation of an altar. And what I've witnessed from my travels has been the creation of a circle with a central point in the center that you could call an altar space. Now, the circle, I think, is a very important symbol because we see a lot of ancient symbols create out of this, including the solar wheel. I mean, I have one of those tattooed on my body. And then the medicine wheel within Native American traditions. And then within labyrinths, we see a lot of circular motion. And I think when we look at like animism or shamanic belief or reincarnation, everything's a circle. Whereas in Christianity, everything kind of faces the altar, everything faces God, and then there's the ascendance up into heaven, because usually the cross is above the altar space. And so the movement of energy within Christian belief systems and monotheistic belief systems are much more like pointed. Whereas I find in the traditional indigenous belief systems of the world, it's much more circular. And so I think that's the main thing to focus on. But the origin of the altar space as we know it today, while is very Christian, is actually Roman. The Romans kind of developed the technique we use to worship the gods or God, and we still use that today, which is really fascinating. Also in the conversation about like the setup of these places, and particularly when it comes to talking about the Romans and their altar spaces, when the Romans were interacting with the Germanic people and they were talking about their sacred spaces, we get a little bit of evidence, mostly talking about wooded groves that they deemed sacred. And we do know into the conversion window of the Germanic people and the Norwegian people into Christianity that the cutting down of sacred trees was highly important to the Christians to removing the belief systems of the pagans in the past. And so we kind of get a glimpse, even though a lot of neo-pagans today use altar spaces as a point of reference and worship within their own homes, in particular in the ancient past, it seems like the outdoor sacred grove, the sacred tree, the circle were a lot more connected to the beliefs of the past. Now, I'm not saying that altars are bad. I mean, obviously the Romans were a polytheistic belief system, and they definitely work to some degree. And so I definitely use a blended practice. I have sacred circles I typically use in nature, and then I do have small little altar spaces at home. And then we create altars at our events with the Fellowship of Northern Traditions, much like this one we created at our last event for the spring for Freya. And so you're definitely going to see a mix of practices out there. Just know that the origins are a little messy. And for the most part, it seems like the shamanic cultures of the world today still use the circle, the sacred grove, more often than not, at least in my observations, rather than the altar space. One thing is, obviously, I like using nature for the most part, but it is nice to kind of treat these objects as the sacredness as they are, especially as we talk about cleansing. And so that's why a lot of the times I'll lay out like something like my poncho here to put everything on and to use as a point of reference for the altar space, and to give them a little bit more reverence. And obviously, the color of the poncho is really nice as well. So one thing you'll probably notice is that within the system set up here, there's a focus on the cardinal directions. So I have the drum facing the east, I have the southern medicine or the hape, and my stuff from my southern journeys facing the south. And then I have the western stuff, which I usually associate like the flute, the setting of the sun, the spirits, and then I have the north, the northern gods, northern ancestors, and in the center is the cleansings, the offerings, and things like that. And so this inspiration comes heavily from a lot of the circles I've been into. If you watch a lot of my earlier content, this is not how I was creating sacred space. I was using more of the altar system. And the setup of the 4 directions is kind of interesting. Here, we'll walk into the sun because that feels fitting. Because obviously when you're setting up a space, you want to watch where the sun is actually at and follow obviously the eastern rising, the western setting, and kind of base everything off of that. But the actual setup of the 4 directions, I've never been able to find the origin of this, besides the fact that our ancient ancestors from all around the world have been doing setups associated with the solar alignments ever since we've been leaving things behind. So when we look at many of our ancient leavings, as far as Stonehenge or anything like that, they're all aligned with the sun. One other mention I want to bring up from the indigenous cultures that I've been a part of, particularly with South America, but also within like the Siberian and a few others, the use of flowers and color is heavily prevalent. I'll try to put up some pictures here of the ceremony I partook in Ecuador, not necessarily the ayahuasca, but just the cleansing and opening ceremonies involved lots of flowers laid out. And this is something I've seen on Instagram a lot, on a lot of different indigenous practices and traditional shamanism and neo-shamanism, is the use of flowers in a circle and a beautiful design and a mandala. And I think this is something that's used in Hindu and Buddhist practices as well. I didn't necessarily have the flowers to do such things, but that is also a way to create a sacred space, is to use flowers, which, you know, obviously go back into the earth and are quite beautiful. But color is very big. Now, this is definitely where it gets a little bit woo-woo, because when you actually think about the practicality of using a spray or some smoke cleanse, what is it really doing? I know I've seen some people argue what it really does, like literally, but spiritually cleansing is a thing. And that is, you know, these objects have been in my bag for a while. I need to take the necessary time to reflect on them, clean them, honor them properly. And then also cleanse myself. One, I'm sweaty and gross from setting all this up because it's humid out here. But also, you know, I have the modern world on me. I have my Wi-Fi signals. I have my cell phone. I have, you know, my modern junk and crap that, you know, kind of takes up space in our soul. And so cleansing is a great way to kind of reset yourself. Now, I think in the practical, I've always thought that cleansing is really good just to kind of stand as a buffer zone. So you're actually taking the moment, you're not just setting up the space and moving immediately into your ceremony that you want to do. You're actually taking a moment to cleanse yourself. You're smelling something different. And these type of things are only used for cleansing. And so when you smell them, you're going to, you know, immediately be taken back. And this is something that I've really seen, like in the classes I've been into about shamanism, is cleansing is highly important. My first teacher was so anal, like you cleansed before you did anything. And this is something that's been really built into me, is that no matter what you're doing within spiritual ceremony, whether it's paganism, shamanism, whatever, you need to cleanse. And I even recommend this for the few people who are Christian that watch this channel. I think it's something that is lost in Christianity, is the cleansing. The actual cleansing can be done with either smoke, water. It can even be used with tobacco. That's actually a big one, is in South American and North American indigenous circles. A lot of the times tobacco smoke. Like I've had, you know, a medicine man, you know, just puff some tobacco and blow it on my back and things like that. So tobacco smoke has been seen as cleansing. I have mugwort and cedar here, I think it is. Obviously, there's a big debate on white sage. I'll let you decide that on your own. But I tend to try to use as local as possible and as ethically sourced as possible. And so I try to find good bundles, like just not like at Whole Foods or whatever. But then I'll also have, as backup, especially for longer ceremonies, I'll have some Palo Santo cones, which are perfectly fine. And then I have some Agua de Florida, and then this is Agua de Aguila, different sprays that you can use. For the most part, it seems like people kind of spray this in their hand, and then they kind of just, so yeah, they spray it in their hands, you know, have your hat off or whatever, and then put it in your face and rub it over the head to cleanse as well. Also just really, really soothing. And then the smoke, obviously cleansing the hands. Cleansing the hands is a big one. Cleansing the different chakra points, all really big things. But yeah, cleansing before a ceremony, so very important, and having a few different instruments, especially if you're holding space for other people. Some people don't like the smell of certain things, and so having a variety of things to use for people to cleanse before a ceremony, I think is highly important. While I'm thinking about it too, actually using like river rocks, this is also a highly debated thing in a lot of circles because, you know, within spiritual ceremony, you don't want to damage the environment. And so you can build things out of natural environments as long as they're returned. You don't want to leave it there. And then obviously try to be as unimpactful as possible. So obviously, like what I've been told is don't take directly from any stream or riverway. You know, if you're going to take any stone, try to take it from a dry bed so that doesn't actually damage any habitat for any animals. And I'm really big on when I hold space. So if I take something from somewhere, we all say thank you to it. We can pass some gratitude onto that object, but then it gets returned to wherever it was from. So yeah, if you want to take anything from the natural environment, just make sure it is returned. So now we're to the calling of space. This is, again, different depending on who your teacher was, depending on your tradition. But for the most part, it's going to the cardinal directions, calling to them, saying some kind of invocation, and going, it depends on the culture, I go clockwise. So I start in the east, and then I go to the south, then I go to the west, and I end on the north. But some people and some cultures are different. And so just keep that in mind, as a lot of these things are interchangeable. This is not the one right way to do this. It is just a way, and I hope it helps you. But for me, I start in the east with the rising sun, and I end in the north. And then when I close the space, I do the opposite. And so my actual calling, I use the Old Norse. I use a prayer from Sigurd Fumal, I think it was. But obviously this can be something different for you. You can do it in silence, but I do recommend using your voice. I've read in many different texts that using your voice to communicate with the spirits is how they listen to you. Let's talk a little bit about offerings. And so with offerings, this can be done in many different ways, as you're learning with everything in this video, is I have a bowl in here. I'm gonna put the physical offerings. So for me, the most common offerings I use are oats and tobacco. This kind of goes to both the indigenous American, but also my Celtic ancestry, is oats are really big in Ireland, as I learned. This is something that can be given really easily to nature. And again, oats is something you can actually, get quite cheap and then create really cool designs and patterns with as well. And then tobacco, this is something very much tied to the indigenous peoples in North and South America. Obviously, I'm doing this video and this ceremony on indigenous land. And so I always take a moment to acknowledge the indigenous peoples, this land that we're on, and using an element that is tied to them to give thanks for the land that we're on and the history and acknowledging that. Now, this one is going to be highly debated. So I know the Siberian circles are against giving alcohol in white ceremonies, in ceremonies involving like good spirits. Alcohol is seen as something that attracts bad spirits, and not just the Siberian, but other shamanic circles. And so when it comes to alcohol, this is kind of where my Norse pagan roots come in, because this is listed as an offering to the earth, is pouring alcohol into the earth. And so that's going to be up to you and your choices when it comes to your preference in sacred spaces. For me, I still have my roots in Norse paganism, and so giving alcohol to the earth as a gift is something that's very symbolic. Now, I think spirits are considered a little bit more like evil spirity. They're literally called spirits. And so maybe avoid the whiskey, but for me, beer comes of the earth, it returns to the earth, and this is a good offering as well. And this is a good beer, by the way. And so after all of that prep, it does take time. You really can't do something like this in a short amount of time, but to create a sacred space, especially one that's kind of mobile, it does take time. You want to make sure you cleanse and reflect, and you want to make sure you have an intention. And that kind of brings us to roughly one of our final points here, is why are you doing this? Why are you holding the ceremony? Why are you holding this space? Within shamanic cultures, obviously you typically hold this to connect to the spirits, or perhaps you do it to help heal someone else. And for me, in my teachings, is if you're doing any kind of work for any other people, you really need to hold the space properly. Space holding is a big part of neo-spiritual circles today. And there's definitely a difference between a good and a bad space holder. And, when it comes to actually being a good space holder, doing all these things, I think is one of the key components without being rigid. It's definitely a hard balance. But yeah, and then as far as like your intention behind it, for me today, my intention, I am actually going to use this space after recording today. I'm going to do a small hape ceremony for myself. I haven't done that in a while. And then I'm going to reflect. As I mentioned in a previous video, both of my grandmothers have passed this year. Been feeling very spiritually clogged up. I've been kind of just diving into the modern world again, having an apartment, car, a new relationship. I've been enjoying it, but I definitely want to start my spiritual reawakening here after slumbering for the winter, and we're moving into the summer now. And so for me, the space is going to be about reflecting on all of that. And so I'm kind of calling to the grandmother spirits, calling to the gods, and reconnecting to these spiritual energies today. So that's my intention. And so something you can also do while holding these spaces is playing musical instruments. So I have my drum here because there's kids out here on like an outdoor adventure at this park. I think I'm going to play my flute. So I'll probably do some hape, reflect, play my flute, connect to the spirits that way. And so yeah, it's ultimately going to be up to you. This is kind of your time. I think, as I called it in the past, a spiritual sandwich. You at the meat. This is for you. What do you want the space to do for you? And I think the potency of how this is going to help you and how it's going to help you connect is all depending on how you set it up and also how you close it. After you've given your offerings, you reflected, you're going to call to the directions once again, thank the spirits, thank the gods, thank the ancestors, and all those who have helped you, and send them away in in a respectful way. Like one of the things I observed from my first teacher, who was German, it's like I always love watching teachers, and like one of the things he would say at the very end is a really quiet Dankeschön. And it's like, it was almost like it wasn't meant for us. It wasn't meant for the people in the circle. It wasn't meant for him. It was meant for the spirits and those listening. And that's something that I've always reflected on, is we're not doing these things for any form of a performance. We're not doing these things really, I mean, they help us, but we're holding these spaces for the external, the spirits around us. And when you're closing a space, it's as if you welcome these spirits into your home, or you've been welcomed into their home. And so what would you do in this? And saying Dankeschön, saying thank you. And so typically for me, as I close the space, I just call to the directions again. If I bow, this is typically when I do it. And I'll just say thank you in different languages. I'm grateful to know how to say thank you in so many different languages. Merci, Dankeschön, gracias, kitos, tak tak, tusen tak. Find a way to bring out your heart and gratitude to these spirits as you go around in the reverse order, and thank these spirits. Something for me as I'm putting away these objects, it's really about reflecting on what they mean to you. I mean, every object in your sacred space is kind of like a story, of where it came from. And so they're highly personal. And oftentimes we don't get to pull these things out. I mean, shoot, it's been over a month since I've had any of this out for me. And so taking a moment to pick them up and reflect on them, be grateful for them, put them to your head, put them to your heart, and be grateful before you put them away, I think is a really good reflective practice. And again, builds that sacredness of the space. If you're just picking them up and throwing them in the bag, are you really treating them well? So yeah, really reflecting on these objects and what they mean for you, I think is highly important. So yeah, there we go. Sacred spaces. I hope this has been helpful to you. Please let me know down below if this is anything that you've already been doing, or if it's something that you're going to try to bring into your own practice. Like I said, I have so many teachers to thank for this, so many amazing cultures and people who have shown me their spaces, who have allowed me into their spaces to inform who I am now. There's a Norse paganism element into this, Celtic paganism, indigenous American, Siberian, Ecuadorian. I mean, there's a little bit of everything from my journey into this space. And that's something, this channel's name is The Wisdom of Odin. Odin was a wanderer. And I think we all have something to learn from one another. And I think as we learn from one another and create these beautiful sacred spaces, I think we're going to find that there's even deeper healing that can be done within ourselves. And so I really hope that you're able to hold a sacred space for yourself or others here soon. Again, it's about the external, and through the external, we heal the internal. So wish you all the best in the holding of your sacred spaces. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in the next video here at the Wisdom of Odin.